I know that they can do it. I want them to do it. I want to take away the pressure from them. Most of the time, mental blocks are much more around anxiety than they are around true fear of getting hurt. Oftentimes, losses are some of the best motivation, and wins are the worst. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cheer Biz Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Cotton, and today we are going to be taking a deep dive, a look inside a coach's mind. You're getting this coach's mind, and we're going to be having a good time talking about some things and a coach's perspective on stuff. Now, I have been a coach for over 20 years. I've been in cheer for over 30 years. I own a gym, if you don't know me, in Beaverton, Oregon called Oregon Dream Teams. I also own a camp company teaching camps throughout the United States. So I travel and teach camps as well, and I get the opportunity to consult business owners. So I spend all of my time coaching and thinking about how to be a great coach. That's kind of be the experience that I kind of draw upon to give you guys a look inside my mind and a look inside what I'm thinking as a coach. And we're going to be very focused on a cheer coach and just the general cheer coach in the gym more than we are going to be talking about a business coach or anything like that. But we're going to be diving into it. Now, before we get into the episode, please make sure you've gone over to Facebook and you have joined our Facebook groups if you are a gym owner. That's Cheer Gym Owners on Facebook. And you have joined All-Star Cheer Coaches and Owners if you are a cheer coach or an owner who just wants to know what the coaches are talking about, kind of like this episode. If you are a parent, I'm sorry we don't have a group for you, or an athlete listening. I know we have some parents and athletes that listen, and I absolutely appreciate it. We don't have a group specifically for you. If you're a gym owner or a gym owner and coach, we want to make sure that you take advantage of our conference in Las Vegas. It's in a couple weeks, January 3rd through the 5th. You're not going to want to miss this conference. It's going to be absolutely awesome. It's in Las Vegas. So what better way to start the new year than a little trip to Las Vegas? Hopefully it's before your kids have come back for practices, and we would love to see you there. Why are we talking about this? So I've seen a lot of questions about, what is the coach thinking when X, Y, and Z happens? And I've even talked to owners who are frustrated with not understanding why their coaches are thinking a particular way or why certain things aren't happening. And so I felt it was worthwhile to talk about things from a coach's perspective, because I talk about things a lot from the business owner's perspective, and I certainly have that. I certainly can provide that and have a lot of expertise in it, obviously, but I also am a coach, and I still to this day, I coach. I coach two teams. I coach a Worlds team and I coach a medium senior 4 team. And I've talked about them a lot, but I think it's important to remember that no coach that I've ever met has ever started out their season wishing that their team would have struggles. I've never had a coach who is hoping that they have to cut kids mid-season, or hoping that they're going to have injuries or issues with attendance. And so in this episode, I'm going to be giving you a dive into my mind and what I'm thinking when certain things are transpiring on a team, and what my perspective is. And I think the perspective of a lot of coaches is. And so number one is what a coach is thinking when their team isn't hitting. And this is an incredibly frustrating position to be in as a coach, because you put together a routine, you select a team, and the routine is not hitting. It's not successful, and you're stuck in this position of I don't really know why. And so what's going on in a coach's head when a routine isn't hitting is normally a few different things. It is, number one, did I mess up in placing this team? Did I put the wrong people in the mix? Now, oftentimes parents or people outside of the industry don't necessarily understand that putting together a successful team is really challenging, and it's not easy. And I frequently use the phrasing of this is chess, not checkers, meaning there's a lot of strategy. It's not just, move forward, jump a piece. It is, when I move this piece here, that has 7 other trickle down effects later on. So I really need to be thinking through every eventuality, and each athlete has to fulfill multiple roles. And if they don't, then I've got to have another athlete who is fulfilling those roles in their place. So it is a really challenging position to be in as a coach. So I'm first looking at, did I place this team incorrectly? Now, over the years, I rarely come to that conclusion because I think we've gotten really good at how we place teams in our gym. And so that's oftentimes not the problem, but it still could be maybe this athlete was placed incorrectly. So the team isn't wrong, but this athlete is placed incorrectly. And the role that I thought they were going to be fulfilling, they're not capable of fulfilling. Now, from there, I'm looking at, okay, is this routine too difficult for them? So the routine isn't hitting. And is that because that the skills in the routine are too hard? This routine is not achievable for the athletes currently. And that can absolutely happen. The routine is too complicated, whether it be for the athlete's maturity or experience, or just the skills are too hard, or the flow of the skills is too hard. It's remarkable how changing one small thing in a routine can suddenly make it more achievable. So my Worlds team this year, we were not hitting successfully heading into our competition this last weekend or 2 weekends ago. And we were not hitting, like really rough routines, and not just one section, but like just a mess. And we made the decision of, hey, we're going to take out this one element because it's not elite appropriate. It is visual, it is cool, but like we're not sure it's really helping us. And we're just, for this competition, we're just going to set out, reset, do our straight up extended stretch, and then do our high to high and our double down. And that singular change, taking out that single skill, had an effect on the entire routine. More skills were being thrown. They actually were starting to come close to hitting the whole routine. And it was just by taking out that one element, that one small thing made a huge difference. So as a coach, I'm always looking at, okay, is this routine too hard? Is that the problem? It's just the routine. And if it is the routine is too hard, what is it that I need to modify? How do I need to change the routine to make it achievable? And oftentimes that is a trial and error. Now, as you gain experience as a coach, you will start to know the things that you can change and make things a little bit simpler. But it could also just be, maybe we need to slow a couple things down. The routine is too hard simply because it is too fast. They do not have the ability to collect themselves and get ready. So simply by adding a set of motions where the athletes are cleaning and setting and dipping, and all of those things are in there, rather than they're doing a motion and then rolling on their butt and then re-grabbing. This also happened with my level 6 team. We were not hitting our rewinds very successfully, but they were doing choreography and they were stepping in on 3-4, turning and dipping at the same time. So like as they're turning in, they're dipping and immediately throwing the rewind. And when we would do the rewinds in isolation without that immediate turn in and dip, they were hitting them. And so we just took out and added 2 counts to them, like turn and set and hold for 2 counts and dip and go. And all of a sudden their rewind started hitting. So that very minor change made a huge difference. And that was because the way the routine was choreographed, which wasn't wrong. It was cool. And I would love to do it like that. And we'll hopefully upgrade to doing that more consistently when we are, going to Worlds. But we needed to make that change for right now because it was too hard for them with where they were at. So as a coach, I'm always looking at, how can I edit a routine? How can I modify things? The next thing that I'm looking at is it too hard for them mentally? Are the athletes not mentally prepared for performing this routine? Do they believe that they're capable of hitting it? And this is a really hard one. Building that mental fortitude and mental toughness to push through a really physically challenging and skill challenging routine is something that takes a lot of time and is not something that we can instantly change. So sometimes I might say the routine isn't technically too hard for them, but it is mentally too hard for them. And then I have to find ways to simplify, take things out so it is less mentally stressful. And hopefully I can get them to the point where they can hit the routine. And it's remarkable. Once a team starts hitting and they realize it's attainable, they're mentally believing that they can do it and they start to hit more often. Simply by that first time. It's like that first 0 is so hard to attain. And oftentimes, not always, because a broken clock is right twice a day. So sometimes a team will hit a 0 and that was just a miracle. But if they hit it and they believe that they did it not through just accidentally being awesome, but we are starting to click it, we're starting to get it, you'll start to see that trend continue. And that's them starting to believe. So I will sometimes edit a routine to build that mental confidence. And then as they become more mentally confident in the routine, then I start to scale things back up. So it's what coaches commonly refer to as watering down. The last thing that I'm looking at is, okay, if it's the skills aren't technically too hard for them and they're mentally tough enough, are they just not conditioned enough? Are they just not in good enough shape to perform the skills? Like, yes, they have the skill. They absolutely have this punch front through to a layout or this front handspring step out round off double back handspring. They have it. They can do it. But then once they get into a routine and it's now 2 minutes in, they don't. And that is a conditioning issue. They're just not in good enough shape. So then I need to figure out, how am I going to get this child and this team conditioned enough so they can do the skills that they need to do in the routine? So I'm always making this assessment. I'm always trying to balance this out and figure out what is the right methodology to get them hitting, right? And ultimately, not hitting is so frustrating because even though hitting 0 doesn't mean you're going to win. In fact, oftentimes you can hit 0 and still get beat, and even get beat by a team that has a deduction for a multitude of reasons. But hitting 0 is kind of the like, okay, we did our job at least. We came in and we showed up and we did a good job and we are capable of hitting this routine. So as a coach, it's really frustrating. Like, no coach wants to be going into a competition knowing, well, we're going to get 1.25 in deductions. That's just guaranteed. So we're just going to choreograph enough in the routine that we still get the points we need. Like, no one wants to be doing that and giving away points. We want to be hitting our routines. That is what we are striving for. And so it's really frustrating. And we go through that, like, what of these things do I need to change? So that's always how I'm looking at it as a coach when my team isn't hitting. Ultimately, I want to get them to the point where they are hitting all the time. That makes me very happy and much less stressed out on competition days. The next thing I want to talk about is what is going through my head as a coach when an injury happens on a team. And I'm going to talk in the moment, and then I'm going to also talk about post-injury, where my thought process is. So in the moment, the first thing I'm thinking is generally some form of, oh, crud, that kid just got hurt. And it's never a good feeling. I hate when my kids get hurt. And even minor stuff, like even just a sprained ankle that I know is going to be fine, it's still just an oh crud. And it's an oh crud for two different reasons. One, in my first initial concern is the kid seriously hurt? How is it going to impact the athlete? What does this mean for them as a person? I care for my kids. The next thing is, how does this impact the team? Right? What is going to be the effect on everything else? Does this mean that we're not going to be able to stunt for a couple weeks? Does this mean that the kid I'm going to have to replace this athlete for a competition, right? All of those things go through my head in like the blink of an eye. Like, I'm thinking about all of those things almost simultaneously. They're all separate and they all kind of go through that progression, but it is like an immediate, like, oh my gosh, this kid got hurt. Are they okay? Now, how does that affect the team? Da, 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 da. I try to be very calm in those situations because I've learned that me getting freaked out doesn't help anything. Now, I'm blessed, I think, just because of the way my life progressed. I actually, when I was writing this episode, I was thinking about, why is it that I'm so calm in injuries? Because I don't like watching shows about surgery. It kind of creeps me out, but like in the moment, I've seen some really gross stuff in my life and it doesn't stress me out at all in the moment. Like, I don't freak out in the slightest. And I think it came from early on in high school. I was really lucky. I took an athletic training program at my high school, and back before they made some rules and changed some things, I was able to do everything. So I went to the training room after school and I was taping ankles, taping wrists, assessing injuries for an hour and a half after school every single day for the fall term, so football season. So I taped probably 60 ankles a day for the football team and then soccer and all the other athletes. So I just tape ankles and tape elbows and wrists and all those different things and set athletes up for success. And then I was on the sideline for football games. So I saw all the injuries that occurred during football. So I saw a lot of blood. I saw blown out knees and broken bones and all sorts of things. And I got to be in the mix, and I got to be in the mix with doctors and physical therapists and certified athletic trainers and helping out. And so I think that just kind of primed my brain at an early age to be able to, see how they reacted and then carry that forward. So I'm able to stay pretty calm. If you ever see me in an injury situation, you'll notice, and I've actually had people criticize me of this, of like, you didn't seem like you cared at all. It's because unless there is an immediate risk to the athlete, like if it's in the middle of a routine and an athlete goes down, you'll see me get kind of amped to be like, stop the routine, stop the routine, stop the routine, because I know that that athlete could get stepped on, landed on, or that them not being there for a catch could mean that someone gets thrown and then the person isn't there to catch them. So there's a number of reasons why you need to stop the routine immediately when an athlete gets seriously injured on the mat. But then from there, once the music is stopped and the issue is that immediate danger is solved, you'll see that I'm going to walk over to the athlete. I'm going to be very calm, because me coming into a situation amped is not going to make anything better. They're already at a heightened emotional state, heightened psychological state. And I want to bring as much calm and collection to that as I possibly can, even if the injury is really bad. So I'm not going to come running over. I don't want to sound out of breath. I want to sound calm, cool, and collected. And so in that moment, my number one concern is taking care of that athlete and making sure they get to the medical professionals that can help them, because ultimately I'm not a doctor. And so anything I do in the moment is literally just to solve the immediate problem. Like if they're bleeding, solve that bleeding problem, or splint them up, get them over to a medical professional who's going to be able to tell them what's actually wrong and give them the actual treatment. That's number one. Once that is taken care of, my next, and somewhat concurrently, if I have co-coaches or things, I want to be limiting the potential trauma through experience of it to the other athletes. So I want to get the other athletes doing something else, not focused on watching the athlete who's injured, get them working, get them doing something else so their mind is separated from it, because that's can cause lasting scars. I saw injuries when I was really, really young, and it definitely impacted me. When I was young in gymnastics, like I think it was my first year on a competitive team, my second year doing gymnastics, I can remember this day vividly. And I think 7, 8, I was on the pommel horse. I was working on just some very basic skills, and this more elite gymnast was on the high bar. He was doing giants, and his grips were oversized, and his grip touched the other side, which means it bound up on his right wrist. I can tell you it was his right wrist. And so his grips locked while doing giants. So his hand could not move anymore, but his body kept going, and he snapped both bones, his radius and ulna in his forearm, snapped them, wrapped around the bar with basically his skin and muscle, a full giant and a quarter. So he was completely wrapped around the bar. I heard it sounded like a gunshot to me at 8 years old, heard it break, heard him scream, watched him get peeled off the bar by the coaches, who then peeled him off and did everything they could and get him to the hospital. But there was nothing done for me, which I'm not blaming them. There was only 2 coaches and they needed to treat him, but there was no one else to talk to me about it, get me away from it, get my mind off of it. And so I still remember that to this day. And I actually was terrified of high bar for the rest of my life. I was one of the reasons I stopped doing gymnastics, because I sucked so bad at high bar, because I was just scared of it. And I wasn't scared that my grips would lock. I was just scared of high bar, because I started out my life in gymnastics with kind of a traumatic experience related to the high bar. And so I want to remove those athletes from that situation, limit how much of that potential trauma that they're seeing, and again, respond very calmly, or as calmly as I possibly can. And then from there, after the athlete is injured, I have two focuses. One is, how do I progress this athlete through this injury, which is really challenging, and maintain their mental health as they're sitting and watching from the sidelines and struggling with that, while also simultaneously putting the team in the best position possible. And sometimes those things don't align very well, because an athlete wants to get healthy and get back in the routine, but the team needs to be able to put together a routine. And if an athlete is out for 2, 3, 4, 5 months and then wants to come in and take their spot back, well, there's generally going to be someone who's been doing that position, and they're probably going to be fairly good at it. And so it doesn't logically make sense for that athlete sometimes to even come back onto the team in that season. That is a really crummy position to be in, because I want the athlete to be healthy. I want to take care of their mental health, but I also need to think of the other 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 athletes that I have to think of and set them up for the most success. And just because an athlete got injured doesn't mean that that team's season has to stop. And so I'm always trying to balance the two, and it's a really, really tough position to be in. Ultimately, I want that athlete to return to play as safely as humanly possible, while not restricting the team and limiting their ability to have the season that they are hoping to have, despite the fact that there was an injury that occurred. The next thing I want to dive into is, what is my perspective on when you have kids not coming to practice or telling me that they're going to miss practice? What's going through my head? So this is 2 different things, but I'm going to put them together. So number 1, when a kid tells me that they're not coming to practice, the first thing going through my head is, dang it, because every single athlete is important to the team. So It negatively impacts practice anytime any athlete miss, no matter how unimportant they may feel. I don't choreograph kids to be in routines to be nadas. And so they're going to have elements of the routine where they matter. And even if you're a front spot, you matter. I had an athlete who was out and she's going to be out long term. She unfortunately had a serious injury on my level 4 team, and her injury was not in the gym. She was skiing. But side note, so she is still participating right now till she has surgery, but the practice that she couldn't participate in, that she wasn't at, she isn't a main base in any of our skills. She primarily tumbles, but she fronts a couple different things, and she's a prep in our pyramid. And when she wasn't there, we couldn't do that side of the pyramid. Her elite stunt kept dropping because they didn't have their front spot to help with the inversion. And her basket was horribly timed because she wasn't there. So even though she may not have thought she was an important aspect of the team, she absolutely is. So when an athlete is going to miss practice, it doesn't matter. It sucks for the team. So I generally am saying, ugh, it sucks that you're missing, but I understand that kids are going to miss for certain reasons. My next thing is, are you missing for a real reason? A real reason is like a graded event, they're sick, there's a family emergency. Those kind of things are like real reasons. Everything else oftentimes is avoidable, but I understand like parents plan vacations and they don't tell the athlete, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm generally, there's like a little bit of a level of frustration there, which I'm sure is readable on my face. From there, it's okay, how do I set up the team for success so we can have an effective practice? Can you have an effective practice if a kid is missing? Yes, you can. So now it's how much time do I have to plan? What I really hate, I hate it, is when I get a text message from someone that is, 30 minutes prior to practice and they're like, hey coach, I've been sick all day, throwing up, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to be able to practice. And it's the first time hearing about it because as a coach, I have a plan going into practice and now my plan's messed up. I would much prefer, and I tell all my athletes and parents this, please text me first, the first moment you're sick, tell me. Like as soon as you possibly can. Obviously, I don't expect you to be like throwing up and like, hey, Dan, I'm puking right now. But I would like you to send me a message as soon as possible. Hey, I'm feeling really bad today. I'll keep you posted. I'm hoping I can make it to practice. Or I'm feeling horrible today. There's no way I'm going to make it to practice. Because generally, right? Because the moment you text me and say, I'll let you know, I'm immediately like, okay, they're not going to be there. And then if they're there, great, wonderful surprise. And if they're not, no stress. I've already made my plan. I've already coped with the loss prior to practice starting. So letting coaches know ahead of time makes a huge difference in our mindset. Like the earlier you can tell us, the better, especially if it's like the day of kind of thing or the day. Hey, if you get sick that night, hey coach, I'm really sick tonight. I don't know what's going on. I'm hoping I'm better tomorrow. At least it's now in my head. So I'm not surprised and caught off guard because I hate being right before practice getting that message. The other thing to talk about is what happens when kids are like routinely not coming to practice, when you have a team that you just can't get regularly attending. This is an issue of a variety of reasons, but I think the ultimate one is, okay, then why is it that they don't value the practice time? Why is it that the kids or the parents or both are not valuing the practice time, especially if they're missing for a lot of sillier reasons, right? Like I said, graded school event, they're sick or they're really sick. There's a family emergency, sometimes a vacation, even though I hate it, those rare little things. But like if they're missing for birthday party or things like that, yes, I understand that those things are important, but like, okay, go to the first part and come later, figure those kind of things out. And that comes from athletes valuing practice time. Oh, we just couldn't get them a ride. That means that they didn't really value the practice time, because if they had asked ahead of time with well enough in advance, it's likely they could have figured out a ride situation. So I'm ultimately looking at, okay, why is it that my parents or athletes are not valuing this time? And the first thing I'm going to look at is, okay, what am I doing? How am I not setting the tone for why practice is important? And then from there, I'm going to look at like gym-wide, is it an issue? There's a number of different things, but ultimately I'm trying to figure out, what's going through my head is, why do they not value practice time? Why do they not see how important it is that we get as many reps as humanly possible? Where are we not in alignment as a athlete coach or a parent coach or an athlete parent coach? Something is not in alignment there when you start having regular misses. People aren't valuing the time. The next thing I want to talk about is what goes through my head when an athlete isn't throwing a skill that they previously had. So we're talking about that kind of mental block situation. And generally what's going through my head is, crud, this is going to be a long road. The next thing going through my head is, what do I have to do to help this athlete believe in themselves and see the potential that I see what they're capable of doing? I ultimately want this athlete to recover and get to a point where they can throw the skill that they're totally capable of throwing. That's my goal. That's their goal. So what do I need to do to set them up for success? I'm trying to figure out what roadblocks I need to remove for the athlete to make it so they are capable of throwing the skill. And most of the time, mental blocks are much more around anxiety than they are around true fear of getting hurt. They definitely can be from fear of getting hurt, but I actually would prefer a fear of getting hurt mental block over an anxiety of failure mental block, because the fear of getting hurt one is a lot easier to overcome with some spotting and drills and confidence building and those kind of things. The overcoming fear of failure and anxiety of letting people down is so much harder to beat. It's just really, really more challenging because it's just deep seated, and there isn't something that you can put a pin on and say, see, this is why it started, and then slowly create stress inoculation to get them back over it. It is a totally different beast, and the goalposts often move. Ultimately, I'm thinking about, how do I set this kid up for the most success? I'm also looking at, okay, what messaging am I sending to the rest of the team? And this is the really challenging one. I actually just had this conversation with my co-coaches last night, because we have an athlete who was not throwing a skill. And I explained to them, I'm like, it sucks because I'm in a catch-22. I'm in a lose-lose scenario, and there's literally no win for me except for to get the athlete throwing the skill again. And even then, that's not like fully within my power. Why do I say this? Because an athlete was choreographed into a skill that they were a little bit unconfident in, and they weren't throwing it. So if I take the athlete out of the skill, what the athlete takes from that is, you don't believe in me. You don't think I can do it. You're taking this thing away from me. Now, how I view it as a coach is, I am taking away the stress of having to perform this in a routine so you can focus on doing it in a relaxed and stress-free environment. And then once you have it, we can put it back in the routine. But no matter how I explain that to an athlete, especially an athlete going through that struggle, I have not found success of them truly understanding it. They still, in the back of their head, that voice tells them, yeah, but it's because they don't believe in you. It's because you can't do it. And that's literally wrong. That's not it at all. I absolutely do believe in every single time I've ever had to do that. I believe in the individual athlete. I know that they can do it. I want them to do it. I want to take away the pressure from them. And then the lose side is, okay, I don't do that. I leave it in, and then they continue not throwing the pass and just continue not believing in themselves and going, see, I didn't throw it. And if you want more information on that, go to my confirmation bias one, but they confirm that they're broken and they can't do it. And because they're not doing it in the routine, and then they feel like they're a failure and they beat themselves up, and it's like a lose-lose. And then on top of that, I have a team of people going, well, why do they get to not throw it, but I get yelled at if I don't throw it? So now I'm in a lose-lose-lose. So it's really kind of a meh scenario. And so I'm always trying to balance, how do I set the team up for success while helping this athlete get through their challenge, while not tearing them down. It's a very complicated scenario. And generally it is somewhat exhausting to determine what is the right methodology to use. The next thing I want to talk about is what is going through a coach's head when a parent starts complaining. All right. So what goes through most parents' heads is, how dare they? I know what I'm doing. They shouldn't ask questions, etc. And then that was me, honestly. And there is still the egocentric part of me in the back of my mind that does that immediately gets defensive when a parent asks questions, especially when it's like, well, why are they doing it that way? Or why is this thing happening? Ultimately, that defensiveness, I know, even though it still happens and I wish I could control it, it comes from a position of insecurity. And it also comes from a position of feeling like they don't understand. So what goes through my head is, you don't understand how many hours that I put into this. You don't see the hours of work watching videos. You don't see the side conversations. You don't see all of the blood, sweat, and tears and anxiety and sleepless nights and all of the other things that I go through as a coach trying to get this team to where I want them to be. And so when you're now asking me questions about, well, why did you put my daughter in this position? You're questioning all of that. You're questioning my dedication and my hard work, right? That's how a coach initially takes it. And some coaches never get past that. I've luckily had enough experience where, I let that all happens in my brain. It happens relatively quickly. We ignore negative Dan, and then negative Dan goes away and rational Dan comes in and goes, okay, let's logically look at this and why they're asking the question. And generally speaking, they're asking the question because they honestly just want to know, right? They're going, why is my daughter in the back? And it's totally okay to say, well, your daughter is in the back because of this X, Y, and Z reason. One, your daughter doesn't have the best jumps. Two, your daughter is in this position in the formation before, which means I can't get her to the front. So the most logical place for her to go is here, because after that, I need her to go to this spot, and I need my formations to look clean, and she's got to match her opposite, and and these are all of the reasons. And when you explain that, you explain the chess of putting together a great cheerleading routine. More often than not, parents understand. They may not like it, and I've left conversations saying, hey, I know you're not going to be happy leaving this conversation, but you're going to leave at least understanding why I made the decision that I made. I look at it as an opportunity to educate parents on why things are done the way they are. So questions, although frustrating sometimes, are opportunities for learning and growth for both me, for the athlete, and for the parent. The last thing I want to dive into is what is going through my head when I lose a competition. I've lost plenty. And it depends what you consider losing. So if you consider anything but first place losing, then I've done that a lot. I've lost more competitions than I've won, I think. I don't know. I don't actually have the number, but I'd venture to say that's close to true. What's going through my head is, okay, how do I utilize this loss as motivation to get the athletes where I want them to go? I think wins are great. I love winning. That is kind of the goal of being competitive. But oftentimes, losses are some of the best motivation, and wins are the worst. It is when teams win that they start to get lackadaisical, when they start to slack, and it's when teams lose that they oftentimes get that motivation to come back. But that is really going to come from the coach, right? If a team loses and a coach responds poorly, then you can very quickly lose the team in terms of their investment and their motivation. I talked about it years ago when it happened on the podcast. One of the moments where I did this was when my medium 4 team lost. For us, it was truly a loss, a summit. We did not make finals. It was the first time we had not made finals in 4 years or more. It had been a really rough season. It was super rough season. We're not super successful. We never really were hitting routines consistently. It was just rough. It wasn't actually that bad, but there was some rough parts of it. But the rough part of the season was that the kids did not get along. The vibe was not good on the team. And so we implemented letters for TNTM to the team. As we left, we had been reading them excerpts from a book that I really love called Legacy. And we really seized on this concept in it of leave the jersey in a better place. So when you leave a team, that team is left in a better place than when you started. So we didn't make finals. I made the decision of okay, we lost, right? How do I channel this? I made my team practice the next day. So instead of going to finals, we went to practice on the field at ESPN. The whole team was there. I said, we're all getting together. We're going to leave the jersey in a better place, and we're going to start working on next year's stunts. I truly think that was a saving moment, because 98% of the eligible athletes came back and cheered the next year. And I do not think it would have happened if we had not taken that approach. If we hadn't said, we're going to leave the jersey in a better place, and we're going to channel this win or this loss into a win, which is building something better for the people that follow on and the people that are going to be here next year. So that's how I approach a loss, generally speaking. So as we leave, I just want to remind the coaches and the parents and anyone listening that coaching is really hard. It's exhausting. It can feel very lonely. It can feel like you give constantly of yourself and you don't get a lot in return. And that is what we sign up for as a coach. I wish I could go back in time and tell the coaches that I had that had a mega impact on me at the time what kind of impact they were going to have. I'm not in contact with my gymnastics coach, and he truly helped craft me into the coach and the person that I am today. I wish that he could know the impact that he had. I didn't tell him at the time because I didn't even know how big of an impact he was having. I knew I admired him, but I didn't even realize how big of an impact it would be. It's so worth it. It's one of the most demanding jobs I've ever had, and it is absolutely worth every stressful moment, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it. Sometimes you sit there and you go, why am I doing this? Why am I caring so much about cheerleading? But it's not about the cheerleading. It's about the people. It's about the impact. It's about the lessons. It's about everything but the cheerleading, even though that is what we spend the most time working on. So as you leave the episode, I just want you to remember that. I want you to keep that in mind. And if you're a parent, I hope you're hearing some of the struggles and thought processes that we go through and going, man, that's tough. because just knowing that you appreciate it and understand where we're coming from means the world. And if you're an owner who doesn't coach, maybe hearing some of this gives you a little bit of perspective of how your coaches are thinking when they're making those decisions. And you're like, why are you doing it that way? I don't understand what you're thinking. Well, they might have been thinking some of these things. So I hope you enjoyed it. Loved having you all. I apologize. I know I missed the episode on Saturday. This is actually the second time I've recorded this episode because the last time I recorded it, the time before I recorded, I had to hook up to a different computer and I didn't plug the microphone back in. So I recorded this plus 2 chapters of my book. So about an hour and a half of recording, and I didn't get any audio. So here we are, round 2. You're getting this one. I hope you enjoyed it. And with that, we'll catch you on the next episode.